Hello, good morning. My name is Alex. I'm on the board of March of Living Australia, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone here today. This is another one of our online events, and we're very glad that you've been able to join us for the first one this year. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of these lands. I'm in Melbourne on the lands of the Kulin Nation, and I want to acknowledge that we're on Indigenous lands wherever we are in Australia. And extend that acknowledgement to anyone else joining us who may be on Indigenous lands as well. It's a great pleasure for us to present this this presentation for you this evening. Some of you may recall that this presentation was scheduled for late last year, and we're very glad that it's been able to be happening today. So thank you very much. This, like all our presentations, this presentation fits very much within our pillars as an organization of learning more about the Holocaust and our connections to the past and to the present. And you'll hear very much about how that manifests itself in this presentation. And so I don't want to tell you too much. I think the story speaks for itself. So I'll let our guest introduce the story and herself. I just want to tell you just a couple of things before we begin. Firstly, that we have our main guest, Friederike Fechner in Germany, and she also has some other guests that she'll introduce as we go in London, in Israel, and in other places. So she'll tell us about that connection and we'll introduce them. During the presentation, everyone will remain on mute. So if you have any questions, and please, we encourage questions, please put them in the chat. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll get to the questions in the chat. But the only thing to say before we begin is just the title of this presentation, which I'm sure you've all seen, but how the renovation of a house and a German cellist's obsession led to the reunification of a Jewish family scattered by the Holocaust. So without further ado, let me introduce Friederike Fechner, who will then introduce herself and her topic. So thank you very much, and over to you. And there'll be some sharing of some slides as we go. So look out for them. Thank you, and over to you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your interest in a story that happened on the other hemisphere of the world a couple of years ago, when my husband and I bought a very dilapidated ruin in the old part of our hometown, Stralsund, in northern Germany at the Baltic Sea. We bought it to reconstruct the old part of our city, not knowing that rebuilding this old house would be the beginning of a long research, discoveries, and unusual friendships. I welcome very much descendants of the family I traced. The descendants are Gabi Glassman from London. She's a psychotherapist for second generation of the Holocaust trauma. And I welcome Steffi Meyer from Israel, whom I never met before, and I'm very glad, Steffi, that you are listening to the presentation. Welcome. Okay, could you go on, please, with the photo? Thank you. Before I start my presentation, please let me introduce myself. My name is Friederike Fechner. I was born and raised in Hanover, West Germany, and studied playing and performing cello at the music schools of Hanover in northern Germany, Switzerland, and in the US. After the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, my husband, our 3 daughters, and I moved from Hamburg to Stralsund on the Baltic Sea, where the little hut is. There's our hometown Stralsund now with 58,000 inhabitants. Next slide, please. In the last years, after having settled, a completely new theme arose and developed into a major interest in my life. It is about the restoration of a medieval townhouse and the history of its former Jewish owners and tenants. For better understanding, let me start my presentation with a short overview of the Jewish history of Stralsund. First, wait a second. Oh yes, first verifiable traces, of Jewish life had been located already in 1282. In the middle of the 14th century, there were violent pogroms in the whole of Pomerania along the north coast of what is now Germany. Around 1500, Duke Bogislav X expelled all Jewish people from the whole state. In the 18th century, Prussian kings became interested in settling of Jewish salesmen for financial reasons and granted religious freedom to their subjects. Nonetheless, many Jewish people used baptism to avoid the ban of settlement. After a mint factory came to Stralsund and had been established in 1757, the brothers Abraham and Herz and 10 further Jews were sent to procure precious metal. The Edict of Tolerance let more Jewish people gather in Stralsund, and by 1776, the first Jewish community had been founded. In 1787, the first synagogue in Pomerania was inaugurated. The Jewish community of Stralsund, even though small and basically not very significant, became nonetheless prominent through two families. Next slide, please. Two big German department store chains, Wertheim and Thies. Next slide, please. And the next one as well. Thank you. Had their origins in Stralsund around the turn of the 19th and 20th century. These stores for Germany had the same significance as Harrods for London, or Meyer or David Jones for Australia. Before 1933, about 160 Jewish residents lived in Stralsund. That is about 0.3% of the total population. There were Jewish shops and small firms, but also Jewish doctors, lawyers, in short, very normal middle-class people. As we know, after the Nazis had seized power, for Jews, the possibility to work in one's occupation became increasingly restricted by boycotts and other repressive measures. Anti-Semitism became so common that it destroyed Jewish business in Stralsund, just as everywhere else in Germany at that time. During the next years, about 50% of Stralsund's Jewish citizens moved to Berlin or emigrated. On the Kristallnacht 1938, the roof of the synagogue was set on fire. On February 13th in 1940, 33 Jewish citizens from Stralsund were arrested in their houses and transported via Piaski to the extermination camp Majdanek and in the very east of Poland. This was the first deportation of German Jews in the whole country to the east, an area which is now Poland. We all know what happened after that. 170 years of German Jewish life in Stralsund, the history of a people who had regarded themselves as Germans, who had been loyal citizens of our state, and who had contributed a great deal to the economic, cultural, intellectual, and spiritual life of our city, was eradicated. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the following event I'm going to talk about happened more or less coincidentally. My husband and I love the old city of Stralsund, and after having moved there in 1994, we walk daily into the old town of Stralsund. Next slide, please. Passing a very dilapidated old building in the historic part of the city in the Heigerstraße. After 40 years of socialism in East Germany, we also wanted to take part into the city's restoration and decided in 2012 to buy and renovate the house. Our architect reconstructed the 2 shops and ground level and 5 apartments. Next slide, please. When the project was finished in 2014, it received an award for the best restoration of a house in the city that year. I was asked to give a presentation on the history of the house for the awards ceremony when the celebration would take place. So I went to the city archive and researched a list of all the owners and shops of the house since the big fire in 1680 when the house had been rebuilt. They were silk merchants, brewers, and since 1880, leatherware dealers from a Jewish family who sold or had to sell the house in 1934. Next slide. These were Friedrich Blach and his parents, Julius and Selma Blach, the proprietors of the house with its leatherware store. Friedrich, being a lawyer and later the director of the Berlin-Charlottenburg Waterworks, fled to the US in 1937. His siblings, Paula, Else, Gertrude, and Margarete Blach, were to fall victim to the Holocaust. When telling this story to the audience, I was deeply moved and I started thinking of trying to search for other descendants of the Friedrich Blach family. I tried it with Facebook, Blach, and some Jewish first names. I wrote to these people whether they had any relatives in Stralsund. No answer. I didn't know how to continue. Then in February 2015, I accidentally met a lady who was a professional genealogical searcher and told me about her work with all kinds of databases. Oh, Katrin, could you do me a favor and use your databases to find out descendants of Friedrich Blach? Within 24 hours, she sent me the list of the shipping passage of Friedrich Blach on the steamer St. Louis in 1937, and the mail address of his grandson, Casey Blake, in New York. I wrote to Casey Blake, professor and director of the Center for American Studies at Columbia University, asking if he were related to Friedrich Blach, the former owner of our house. Dear Friederike Fechner, thank you so much for writing. What a wonderful surprise. Yes, I am the grandson of Friedrich and great-grandson of Julius Blach. My grandfather Friedrich and my grandmother Kate managed to escape Germany during the Nazi period, eventually settling in New York with their children. My father Peter Blach, who changed his name to Peter Blake, had a major career as an architect and critic. Kate's brother, the renowned writer Hans Saal, also made it to New York, returning to live in Berlin at the very end of his life. A somewhat distant cousin, Walter Sanders, also made it to the US and had a career as a photographer for Life magazine, and then retired in Munich. In addition to myself, the surviving members of the next generation are my sister Christina Blake Oliver and my cousin Kate Lanier, here with her two boys. And then there are two more generations after us, including my daughters, Hannah and Laura Blake. As you can see, there are many Blach-Blake descendants alive and well in the US. I had the good fortune to visit Stralsund in 1999 with my father, saw what a beautiful city it is, and also heard his fond recollections of visiting there as a child. He loved walking through the city, especially its port area with fishing boats that sold smoked eel and herring. I don't believe my father showed me the house where you live, though I might be mistaken. My father did not speak about the tragedy of the Holocaust that overtook so many members of the family. That chapter was closed for him. I know all of us would be thrilled to see photographs of the Julius Blach house and hear any information you might want to share with us about your home. I look forward to hearing from you again and perhaps meeting you and your husband sometime in the not too distant future. With all best wishes, Casey. I decided to send Casey documentary evidence of his ancestors and went to the archive and copied all the birth, marriage, and death certificates for him. The archive helped me to clarify the whole genealogy of 2 centuries of Blach family members until Friedrich Blach and his siblings. I went to the Jewish cemetery in Stralsund, took pictures of the family's gravestones, and sent the whole package to New York. A heartfelt exchange started, and my husband and I decided to meet Casey and booked a flight to New York for October 2016. Meeting for dinner on Broadway, we talked intensively for more than 4 hours about Casey's family. It turned out that his parents and grandparents had built a wall of silence around their family's story. Casey told that his grandfather Friedrich and his grandmother Kate, next slide please, here the photo was taken for the magazine Vogue, had never returned to Germany after the war. Germany, their cradle and their spiritual home, which had been so dear to them. Friedrich had been a highly decorated and heavily wounded Prussian officer during the Great War, and this Germany had so bitterly disappointed him. Casey asked me about the entire family tree that I had sent him, and I tried to give him a lot of the details of his ancestry, including the family members of his great-grandfather Samuel Blach and the roots of the Blach family in a little village called Reichensachsen, close to Frankfurt. Back in our hotel, we received an email from Casey. You did a beautiful job in rescuing the house from ruin, which is in its own right a recovery of our family's past. In the airplane, I read a recollection of Pomeranian Jewish refugees who described their escape from the Nazi terror and the time spent in emigration. Next slide, please. One was the letter of Rosemarie Simons Joseph from Stralsund. That's Gabi Glassmann's mother, who is sitting in the audience. That stirred my interest in particular because Friedrich Blach's sister Gertrude had married a certain Max Joseph. Rosemarie wrote about the discrimination in Stralsund, her wedding in 1932, her escape in 1938 with her husband and her little son Peter to Holland, and she wrote about her parents, Gertrude Blach and Max Joseph, or better to say Joseph, because it was German, who owned a large department fashion store opposite of that of the Wertheims. Moreover, Rosemarie wrote about their flight to Amsterdam and about her little boy Peter, who had to hide in constant fear of betrayal and deportation during the German occupation of the Netherlands. Rosemarie's parents were betrayed and deported to be murdered in the concentration camp Sobibor in 1943. A compassionate Christian Dutch warden and his wife had adopted Peter to keep him safe. Alas, the host mother of little Peter was denounced too, and Peter, at the age of 7, was deported to the concentration camp at Bergen-Belsen. And he survived, like his parents. What did Rosemarie write in the letter in 1988 at the age of 78? My son Peter is now 53 years old, director of a large company in Amsterdam and has 5 children in Jerusalem and Holland, and my daughter lives with her family in London. Immediately, this detective story flashed inside me. You must be able to find this Peter. Then Casey and Christina would have yet further relatives. I sifted restlessly through the internet in search of companies for the name of Peter Simons Joseph, then tried to find Peter's son in Jerusalem with the name of Simons Joseph. Nothing, nothing. Then I remembered that Rosemarie wrote she had divorced from her first husband and got married again. Oh my, How could I find out Peter's last name? In full of despair, I called Katrin, the genealogical researcher, again and asked her, please read the story. How do we find Peter? Katrin read Rosemarie's letter and immediately said, married in Stralsund in 1932? Then go to the city archive and find the certificate of Rosemarie's first marriage. So I did and found that Rosemarie had married a certain Günther Weishut, a businessman from Hamburg, in December 1932. So I searched in the internet for Peter Weishut and found Peter Weishut, a managing director of the international company Akzo Nobel. I looked on Facebook and connected with his son Daniel Weishut in Jerusalem. Dear Friederike Fechner, thank you for contacting us. The late Rosemarie Simons Joseph is in fact my grandmother. Apart from the family tree, most information on our family in Stralsund is with Gabi Glassmann, nee Simons, my aunt from my grandmother's second marriage, who lives in London. Kind regards, Daniel. Immediately thereafter, I got a long mail from Daniel's aunt, Gabi Glassmann, from London, who is sitting in the audience. Next slide, please. Completely excited, she asked me 1,000 questions about Stralsund and wanted to connect to her family. In the following days, my email address had been copied into all their mail groups. We organized a Skype conference, and I was privileged to participate in these highly emotional first encounters. Gabi writing to Christina, I'm so excited about my new cousins and also about all the archive material. And Christina Blake wrote to her 81-year-old cousin Peter Weishut in Amsterdam. I thought my German family had all died in concentration camps, and to discover so many relatives who are alive and well is truly amazing. That was the status of March 2017. What has happened since then? Casey's sister Christina and her husband David Oliver came to visit us in Stralsund in April 2017. She said, this is my first visit in Germany. I never ever wanted to go. But now, since I have this personal connection, I feel able to come. Together, we have passed all the stations of the family history and had a very intense time together. We talked a lot, we sang together, we laughed a lot and cried too. Moreover, for Christina's visit, I had invited a cousin of hers, Tim from Rostock, which is about 80 kilometers from Stralsund, who is the great-grandson of Paula, Friedrich Blach's sister. Christina had not known of his existence until then. The Blakes and the Weishuts met for dinner in New York in June 2017. We have reconstructed the lettering of the Lederhandlung Gebrüder Blach on the wall of our house as it looked like before 1938. I got an invitation from the German embassy in London to give this presentation. Here, for that event, quite a few Blach descendants attended from the US. These are family members from about 5 different families. Casey Blake visited Stralsund with his daughters as well as his cousin Kate, who showed the roots of their family history to her boys. The family reunion of all Blach descendants who were able to attend from Israel, the US, England, the Netherlands, and Germany had been planned since 2020, and finally, after the pandemic, took place for 4 days in August of 2022. A couple TV documentaries and radio productions had been made since then. Further research using a city archive in southern Germany connected me with a researcher who did a remarkable job of discovering and locating the oldest 17th and 18th century gravestones of the Samuel Blach family, which have been miraculously preserved. The entire family history of the Blachs from 1600 to today had thus been explored. Gabi and David Glassman visited us in Stralsund for the commemoration of the Kristallnacht on 9th of November 2017. Gabi gave a presentation about her family in Stralsund and as a professional therapist about the traumata of second-generation victims of the Holocaust. This all was about the owners of our house in the Heigerstraße 89 in Stralsund. At a certain point of my investigations, it became apparent that the ownership of the house and the financial management wasn't the same as the operation of the leatherware shop. Even before Julius Blach's death in 1921, this was continued more through the family of his brother Felix. In the city archive, I searched for the families of Felix' two sons, Paul Samuel and Carl Philipp. Paul Samuel, the older one, went to Berlin and stayed there, while his wife, Hedwig Wertheim, and their two children escaped the Nazi terror in 1939 with the children's transport, the so-called Kindertransporte, to England. Maybe he wanted to follow or bring back the family when the bad times were over. He stayed in Berlin, but the family? I advertised with the help of my new friend Gabi Glassman in the Journal of the Association of Jewish Refugees, AJR, in England, and received a message from a very resourceful amateur genealogist who offered his help to identify a lot of other descendants of the Blachs and found the families of Paul Samuel's children, to whom I wrote and who sent photos to me. Paul's younger brother, Carl Philipp, joined the leatherware company in 1915. After the business flourished during and after, next slide please, after the business flourished during and after World War I, it took more and more of a downturn as a result of the Great Depression. Carl Philipp's two sons were then subjected additionally to anti-Semitic reprisals, which made the survival of the business leather shop Gebrüder Blach impossible. Carl Philipp and his wife Louise had two sons named Hans and Gerd, born in 1917 and 1919, who started to work in the leather business in the middle of the 1930s. Their mother, Louise, died in 1935 at the age of 40 years, a short time after the business celebrated its 70th birthday. For that anniversary, Carl Philipp had written a complete chronicle of the company Blach, where he had collected lots of photos, descriptions of the people who had been working there, advertisements, newspaper articles, and so on. This chronicle had survived in a cupboard of his daughter-in-law until 2018, so it was possible to reconstruct the whole 70-year history of the leatherware company. Next, thank you. So here you see Julius Blach on the left side at the bottom. You see Selma in the middle, on the very right, his wife, and the four daughters who were all murdered in the Holocaust. Carl Philipp writes about his last working day. I quote, "My wish to preserve the business for my sons did not come true. Today, the 27th of June 1938, the company has to close its doors forever in the 73rd year of its existence. 3 years have passed since I wrote this book. In that time, I did my best to keep my father's business running. I did not succeed. I tried to sell my company or lease it, but I didn't get permission to do so. Therefore, I decided to liquidate the company entirely. I have met all my obligations, and that is how I and my family go to Berlin and then abroad. The folder containing 50 letters showing his attempts to leave Germany was also given to me by Carl Philipp's daughter-in-law. I quote again from the Chronicle. As I write this, the basement has been cleared and I'm sitting in my empty living room for the last time thinking about the time when, as a child, I was sitting on my father's knees in the same room, listening to him telling me about the time when I would be able to join the family business. I cry to you, my deceased ancestors, that there is no fault on my part for the decline of the company. You, my beloved forefathers, who have dedicated your entire strength to the business. You, who trusted me that the same will be preserved in your spirit. I call to you that I'm innocent in the failing of your life's work. I call to you that I have always tried to preserve your heritage, but that I had to give way to fate. I will close this book with a vow that wherever I will start a new life of business and rebuild a new life, I will do this on the basis of being a decent and honorable salesman, as I learned this from you, my beloved ancestors. Stralsund, 21st of June 1938, Karl Blach, former owner of the company Gebrüder Blach Lederwaren. After leaving Stralsund in the summer 1938, Carl Philipp fled into hiding to Berlin with his second wife, Lisbeth, and their 2 sons. In the same year, Carl Philipp and Lisbeth became parents of 2 more children. Due to the fact that his second wife, Lisbeth, was not Jewish, and therefore his marriage qualified as a privileged mixed marriage, Carl Philipp was not deported. The term privileged mixed marriage was invented within the framework of the infamous Nuremberg laws forbidding intermarriage between Jews and so-called Aryans. And because of the laws, to marry a Jewish man made life even harder for the woman than for a non-Jewish man to marry a Jewish woman. Carl Philipp suffered from permanent persecution and was subjected to forced labor. The inevitable happened. In 1942, Carl Philipp's sons, Hans, with his wife Ruth Unger, both aged 24, and Gerd, aged 22, tried to escape deportation. However, they were discovered and the Gestapo deported all 3 to Auschwitz in late 1943. According to the Berlin commemorative book, the fate of these young people is officially unknown. I was able to contact Ruth's descendants in Israel and exchanged photos. Carl Philipp went into hiding in the Otto White craft shop where blind people worked in the courtyard complex Hackische Höfe in the heart of the city of Berlin. Otto White, who could be regarded as the Oskar Schindler of Berlin, hid Jews first amid his blind workers, then in and behind built-in closets. Today, the former craft shop of Otto White can be visited as a museum. In 1944, the hiding place at Otto White's craft shop had been discovered, and Carl Philipp had to work as a forced laborer in other branches of the war industry. His brother, Paul Samuel Blach, also had to work as a forced laborer in Berlin before his deportation to Auschwitz. His date of death is believed to be the 31st of December, 1944. Karl Philipp Blach survived the Nazi terror. Ration cards or food cards were not intended for Jews, also not for non-Jewish women who were married to a Jewish man. The misery was tremendous. They were in an awful situation. Karl Philipp died in May 1946 at the age of 59 from malnutrition, severe anemia, and a broken heart. His wife Lisbeth died in 1985. I met her granddaughter a couple times. Ladies and gentlemen, I have often been asked why I'm doing what I'm doing. Do these families really want somebody to get so deeply involved with their lives and fate? Can those who suffered in this way tolerate a German bearing the infamous historic burden, occupying herself with the family connections of Jewish victims? Besides being profoundly moved by the fate of the former residents of our house in Stralsund, I wanted to give understanding and friendship a chance and to convey a different impression of Stralsund, of Germany, and of the Germans than the memory which still hovers like a dark, heavy cloud over our country and our people. The most painful rejection of these innocent and individual victims would be in the continued refusal to remember, in indifference. We should never let that happen. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Friederike. And the last quote that was on the screen is exactly what I was thinking of as you were speaking. What a tremendous presentation. And I can only imagine how emotional it must have been for the families that you brought together. I was emotional just listening to it. And I think as a result of that, and given the first question that's already in the chat, maybe we can hear from Gabby in London, who was mentioned in that presentation, about how she felt discovering her new family, and as the questioner said, what does it mean to feel have the silence end for you? So Gabby, let's hear from you first, and then if anyone has any more questions, please put them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. For me, it was a wish that I had for a long time, that I thought would never come true. So the result was when Friederike contacted me, that I had 3 sleepless nights until we actually spoke to each other and saw each other on Zoom. So and from there it has just been one event after another. We've really, there have been just amazing, rewarding events. But for me, it's I had actually been back to Stralsund twice. Once in 1992, so just after the fall of communism, with my husband, and then in 95 with my daughter. And in 92, I saw the house that Friederike bought later, and it was so dilapidated. I could barely look at it. And the only thing that was still there was the chute of the leather, where the leather was delivered into the basement. But so the whole search has meant that I did see a different side to Stralsund, because in 1992 and in 1995 was worse. It was even more neglected the whole time, but it felt so raw and people were so unfriendly, and I could understand why my mother never had wanted to go back because of anti-Semitism.
Yes, of
I
course.
hear your second question, so but I'll stop here.
Oh, no. The second question was just, how did it feel for you to have this? You know, you said you were waiting for this, so you knew that there was family that you didn't know?
No, I was hoping. Like you hear of other people that they've been so lucky that well, it's like a tremendous gift that to have your past uncovered and to have new old family. We knew that there was family, and we thought they weren't interested in us because they never visited, and my mother had very fond memories of them. My mother was 10 years older than her cousins. So my parents were Holocaust survivors, but and the family in the States had got out on time, but it seems as if they found it almost harder to deal with the past than my own family.
And Friederike, was there anyone that you discovered who wasn't interested? Continuing on from this point, was there anyone who you discovered who wasn't interested in being contacted? You discovered that they were real family, but they had no interest in connection?
Well, I know that Christina Blake wanted to contact children of Paula, and in South America, which haven't been contacted yet, although there were a lot of tries. So we still hope that we can get into contact with them. And otherwise, except one person in England, the family was very, very positive. And I always, when I wanted to trace another family, I asked whether the Blach family whether that would be all right, that I try to get in contact, because I didn't want to do it without permission of the family. But it was they were all very positive, and I'm really very happy about that. They obviously didn't have any bad feelings against my research.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, on the contrary, I'm sure they're very grateful to you because you did what you brought them together in a way that maybe they weren't able to do themselves. So I think they're all very grateful to you, and I'm sure we're very grateful listening to this story, finding lost family.
I think it was a win-win situation. I mean, they got the family history back, and I got wonderful friends.
No doubt. Does anyone have any questions? Any other questions for Friederike or Gabi while we have them? I might have one more, but
Alex?
Yes, go ahead, Cedric.
There are two questions that I posted there, but I'll ask them live if I've got the mic.
Go ahead.
Friederike and Gabi. Friederike, that was absolutely incredible, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. From the comments that we'll send you, that are listed here in the chat, we'll send you all of them. The audience has been absolutely wrapped by this, and there's so much to talk about it. So I had two questions. One is, one of the things that you mentioned that you were sort of concerned about going through this process, or was what would be the reaction? And I would say more so, if my understanding is not of the family, but more of the German public, with regards to, why is this German person doing this? So has there been any negative feedback about your efforts in Germany or elsewhere?
Well, actually, I got also in Germany only positive reactions. There were the media who there was made a film and also a feature on the radio, and people were writing to me whom I just don't know at all. There was just one person I met, and he said, "Don't you have to do anything more important than this?" I was so I couldn't say anything else, because I thought this was really very, very unfriendly or whatever. No, I had only positive reactions, and people supported that I'm going, that I should go on. Sorry for my bad English.
No, all
No,
good.
no.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Also,
And then, Alex, if I may, I'll just continue to the next question. And that is, and it's sort of a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And that is, you've been awarded a Order of Merit of some sort. I don't remember the exact title, from the German government. So what is it? Why is the German government doing or actively promoting this kind of I guess soul searching to a certain degree? What is the logic behind it?
well, I think they want to motivate people, first of all, to look after the history of their houses and their places, and also to get interested in the Jewish history of Germany. I mean, I think the older I'm going to be, the less interested is the younger generation, and you have to have you have to give certain effort to make people interested in what of history we have, and that it still should be alive. And I think with personal examples like this story, you can catch people much better than with just the history in numbers. And
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, Friederike. I think that may have been the last questions, unless I'm missing some. So let me finish off by saying thank you, everyone, for joining us. As you may have seen, this session was recorded, and you'll receive an email with a link to this recording, as well as feedback survey shortly, so that we can continue to improve these events. Talking about events, we have a couple coming up in March, so keep your emails, keep looking at your emails, and you'll receive information about that shortly. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to our newsletter. As you know, this year an Australian group is going on March of the Living, so that should be very exciting for those of us going. And we'll certainly keep you posted with future events as well. So I think with that, let me bring the event to a close. Thank you very much.
Friederike wanted to say something, Alex. Just one second.
Sure. Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to say. I mean, after I have traced the whole history of the Blach family, I wanted to do more for the history of our city, and we did a digital commemoration book. It's www.gedenkbuch-stralsund.de, and there you can see online all Jewish people who have lived here in Stralsund and about their fate, and photos as long as we have them. And maybe you can put this, Alex, on the list, or on the you could just mail it around.
Distribute that, yes.
Some families who would be interested, because there are some families from Australia listed there.
Yes, so we'll certainly get that website link from Friederike, and we'll distribute that to our mailing list. So we'll be in contact with her shortly. and then we'll get that out to everyone in our next newsletter. And I think then now I can officially close off right on time with half a minute to go. So thank you everyone for joining us from all over the world. I know we've got participants not just in Australia, but obviously around Europe and all around Australia. So thank you again for everyone joining us, for giving up an hour on a Sunday to be with us. And as I said, shortly everyone will get an email with a link to the video, a link to the website, and more information about this year's March of Living and future events. So thank you everyone, and have a great night. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.